Yes.
Because from a military strategy perspective, there's pros and cons to that decision.
Pros and cons to every decision. The question is, did he think that he could win a quick and decisive victory? And he did. I mean, as did his generals. It's very interesting. I've spent a lot of time studying German decision-making in World War II. If you look at the German decision to invade Poland on September 1st, 1939, and you look at the German decision to invade France on May 10th, 1940, and then the Soviet Union on June 22nd, 1941. What you see is there was actually quite a bit of resistance to Hitler in 1938 at the time of Czechoslovakia, Munich. And there was also quite a bit of resistance in September 1939.
Internally, or you mean?
Internally, for sure. Yeah. People had doubts. They didn't think the Wehrmacht was ready. And given the fact that World War I had just ended about 20 years before, the thought of starting another European war was not especially attractive to lots of German policymakers, including military leaders. And then came France, 1940. In the run-up to May 10th, 1940, there was huge resistance in the German army to attacking France. But that was eventually eliminated because they came up with a clever plan, the Manstein Plan. If you look at the decision to invade the Soviet Union on June 22nd, 1941, which is the only case where they fail. They succeeded in France, they succeeded in Poland, they succeeded at Munich in 1938. Soviet Union is where they fail. There's hardly any resistance at all, right?
Yeah. Well, and to say that they failed the Soviet Union, I mean, my grandfather fought, from the Soviet Union, there was a lot of successes early on. So there's poor military, I would say, strategic decisions along the way, but it caught Stalin off guard. Maybe you can correct me, but from my perspective, terrifyingly so, they could have been successful if certain different decisions were made from a military perspective.
Yeah, I've always had the sense they came terrifyingly close to winning.
Yeah.
You can make the opposite argument that they were doomed, but I'm not terribly comfortable making that argument. I think the Wehrmacht by the summer of 1941 was a finely tuned instrument for war. And the Red Army was in quite terrible shape. Stalin had purged the officer corps. They had performed poorly in Finland, and there were all sorts of reasons to think that they were no match for the Wehrmacht. And if you look at what happened in the initial stages of the conflict, that proved to be the case. The Germans won a lot of significant tactical victories early on.
And if they focused and went to Moscow as quickly as possible, it's, again, terrifyingly so, could have been basically topple Stalin. And one thing
that's possible.
That's possible.
Fortunately, we're not going to run the experiment again,